The clock on the wall reads 7 o'clock, and so I'm going to call and seeing what we have a quorum, I'm going to call the Finance Committee meeting to order. I want all of us to be aware that we are being recorded. So please, if you don't have a microphone near you, please try to grab one or share when you make a statement so that those listening at home have a clear understanding of what's going on. So, the first order of business tonight is we have two sets of minutes that have been distributed, June 27th and July 25th. Do we have any comments on June 27th? I have one comment for the reporting secretary. These are fine minutes. I don't have any quibbles with what you've written, but I would like to have one other sentence added. This is during the conversation with Mr. Frazier from the bond council that we had come visit us. So on page 2 of these minutes, there's a 2.5 line first sentence. After that sentence, I'd just like it to say, he noted that, quote, "we are a frequent borrower," quote, which was viewed as providing a valuable track record when establishing our rating. He noted that, quote, "you are a frequent borrower," close quote, which was viewed as providing a valuable track record when establishing a rating. The main point there, when he was here talking to us, for some reason I decided I had to write that in my notebook because it just struck me when he said it. We are a frequent borrower. And I just want that added to the minutes. That's all. Otherwise, does anyone else have any comments about these minutes?
One comment on page 5 of that same set of minutes. Right above where it says correspondence, the last sentence said both Mr. Patel and Ms. Whitman suggested that consideration, you can read the rest of the sentence. I'm just wondering, how do we keep these things in mind as we're moving forward? Because I don't think that this would take effect. And it's about the designing the middle school warrant article. And how do we capture these to make sure that it's raised again at a future time? Is that up to the person who makes the comment?
I think that's an excellent question.
Yeah.
Have a real.
Do you see where
I'm not either.
Okay, where it says correspondence,
page
that
5.
topic,
Page 5.
page 5 of the June 27th minutes.
Oh, it's the, are we in
Right
reverse order?
Yeah, we
Oh,
are.
we're
We're in
all right.
reverse order. We are.
And it's right, the sentence right above that. Both Mr. Patel and Ms. Ortner suggested that consideration be given to designing the middle school warrant article so that it is contingent on the school committee voting the Peabody building surplus and that the land and the building be sold. Now, it's not, I just wonder, at what time would this be coming up again? And are Mr. Patel and Ms. Ortner responsible for raising it again at a future time, or?
It's an excellent question. The warrant article would be, I believe, would be offered by the school committee. And I'm just trying to understand how we would convey that to them. If you'd like, I can certainly, correspond with them from the chair and say, this has been brought to our attention. Please keep this in mind when crafting your article.
Okay.
Actually, it would go to the, it would likely.
I think the whole committee has to really decide if
Yeah.
we really want to do this or not, or suggest this, or it could be an amendment to their article, or I just didn't know how we proceed with something like this.
I think it's an excellent question.
Would that suggest that some sort of vote is in order in support of a motion
That's
to
correct.
correspond with school committee on this topic?
I think that it makes sense for us to, if we want to convey it, let's back up a little bit here. I believe the middle school building committee will probably be the ones who are ultimately crafting such an article. It's not clear to me whether they're the ones who put it on the warrant or whether the school committee puts it on the warrant. They're a subcommittee, I believe, the middle school building subcommittee. But they would probably be the ones in charge of figuring out the financial characteristics of what they're looking for the design funds.
Okay.
And so it would be likely that would be where the financing article gets crafted. But I believe the school committee, that's a subcommittee of the school committee. The school committee would be responsible for putting it on the warrant. We should probably think about communicating this to the school committee.
If we want to do it.
If we want to
right?
do it.
Yeah.
So I would entertain a motion, because I think it seems like a very reasonable proposal. I would entertain a motion, and then we can have discussion to see whether or not we would like to proceed with this. Ma'am.
Finish the minutes, right? Can we just finish the minutes before we go to a new
Okay,
business?
we can deal with the minutes. So Dee, thank you for your comment. I think that's wise. Let's get a motion on this set of minutes with my one amendment. I don't hear any other amendments at the table at the moment.
I'll second that.
I can't move it. I need a motion.
I make a motion to approve the minutes as amended by adding the sentence that Dean just read.
Second.
Okay. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So July 25th minutes. Any comments?
I do have a comment and a question. On page 4, under the municipal stabilization fund, towards the bottom third of the paragraph, it says, funds can be used to soften any blips in the debt reporting schedule periods with blips enclosed. I'm just wondering, looking back on that, what would a blip be? So, a spike.
Yeah, a spike.
Well, the word spike is in quotes one sentence ahead of that.
Exactly. Okay.
So why don't we just change spike to spike or blips to spike?
Blip or spike implies a short term
Yeah.
Right.
move,
Right.
whereas
Okay, just looking for clarification on what that meant. And then there's a grammatical error on the bottom of page 4, the last sentence, goes into page 5. It says legal costs at the level that have been spent the past couple of years. The costs are not sustainable and continue to be jarring to many. So it's
Oh, so that's R.
costs are and continue to be jarring.
Good.
If only it was a one-time cost.
Any other comments?
I have a
Okay.
proposed, on page 3, at the bottom of page 3, the first sentence. During the discussion, the SGR for January 1, 2019 was calculated to be 1.8%. That was something that was done very quick and dirty. In fact, it's coming in at 2.16%. So I would propose that we change that from calculated to quickly estimated.
Estimated.
That's it.
I don't know.
That was a kind of just off the cuff. It was wrong. So just change that to estimated.
We're having a grammatical discussion here. So the sentence may be correct, and I may need to go back to 9th grade. So let's
Well,
keep
we're
the
not
sentence.
going there. Keep it the way it was amended. Let's move on.
No, I'm sorry. So are we, is it R? Let's see. Legal costs are not sustainable.
Well, it says at the level. Level is singular.
It's singular,
and all
right.
the rest of it is probably okay, but whatever.
Okay.
I stand corrected on my correction.
Okay.
Okay, so we're not gonna move to amend with Wade's proposal, but Mary's proposal for estimated, I think that's.
We're not changing blips.
I think we can leave blips. Yeah, I think we can leave blips. But I do need a motion, an amended motion for these, or a motion for these as amended.
I move that we accept the minutes with the one amendment.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Oh, it's abstention. Oh, okay. You can always vote.
You can always vote.
Okay. So, before we move to the calendar review, let's just, since we don't really have a place for Dee's question, I think we should just get to it rather than let it drift out into the netherworld. So, let's talk about that for a moment. If we would like to, from the last meeting, we did vote that we would like to ask the select board to please consider a warrant article to create a fund and send some correspondence. So if we would like to communicate some interest in how a warrant article, which we anticipate will be crafted, has some characteristics to it, I think it's in the same vein as what we did from the last meeting. So is there a general interest in doing that? Is it just Wade and Dee who care? or Dee and Parshar who care?
I think it's really a matter of, should we have a discussion about, number one, do we want to say anything to them about how they're crafting their article? And if we do, then is it appropriate that we would ask them to take the surplus land and building and ask them to sell that? I mean, there are a lot of different ways that they can dispose of the property or retain the property, so I just don't know how we want to go forward with that.
It would, so I think we're in a little bit of an unusual spot here, just to put a fine point on it. The school committee is going to be asking for the design funds, and in that article, those design funds could be, they expect to surplus the land to the town because it's under their control at this time. So it seems like that particular aspect of it is a town function, whereas the warrant article will be the school committee proposing that we need design funds for this building. I'm not sure whether we can marry the two functions together.
So the reason I think I asked this, is it automatic and given that the school committee has to transfer the land? and
No,
the building?
they've indicated an intent to surplus it. They could keep
Right.
it under their control and think about maybe building a new building for some other purpose or using it for some other reason.
And so I think that's why the thought was, geez, if intent is great and we trust them and that's fine, but otherwise, is there a way to make it contingent? That's all. And if it has normally operated, past practice has always been, well, we trust them and they've always done that, and that's what we expect, and maybe we just let it go, right?
Well, so the chair of the school committee, I think, has said many times in public forum that the intention is to, I think she did use the word
Surplus the land.
land back to the town. My understanding is the town has always owned the property to begin with, but as you point out, it was under the school's jurisdiction, and I think they've publicly stated their intention to do that,
Oh, that's fine.
unless that's changed.
Yeah, that's fine.
Then it would be the town's decision, the select board's decision
Right.
as to what.
What to
dis-
do.
Of what to
disposition,
do with
not the
that.
school committee.
Well, what about the building? Is that also,
Well, I
that
think that
also
runs with the
reverts
land.
back?
Yeah, I think it
That goes
all
with the
reverts
land?
back.
Right.
It's real property, and I think the whole real asset reverts back to the control of the town and the town manager in that regard. So they're not gonna.
Probably
They-
not.
They
but
want
in
it,
the-
exactly.
At this point, it's quite premature to really look at what the disposition of the property might be, whether it's sold or
Agreed.
used for a palace for, school committee or something like that. Yeah, I mean, there's a large discussion that has to take place, and I think an involved discussion involving needs and so on. And I think it's kind of outside of our jurisdiction, but it certainly has to be solved tonight.
No, we're not intent on solving it, I don't think. Carl?
Yeah, and I agree with Carl's comments, and I think we're also going to have lots of opportunity to send our perspectives on the spending on the school and how it's going to be funded through the process. So I'm not a fan of this. I think we'll have plenty of other opportunities, and I agree with you. I think it's premature to specify for them what they're going to do with the building.
It might be a good idea, but it might not.
Well, I'm just thinking about it in the context of the large-scale capital planning process that's undergoing, that will be undertaken. And, you know, how do we look at the highest and best use of a piece of property, or, you know, in the mix of things? So I think that was really in the background of my mind in terms of the disposition of this land.
Determination of the highest and best use. Really beyond.
School, it's our FinCom
No,
role.
I understand that. I just didn't know when or how or if we even bring this up.
Yeah, each meeting we've had, you know, more conversation about what I'll call a parallel track. Like the school building, the middle school building subcommittee is moving forward apace. And that track has an end date, and they've already sort of speculatively put a marker down as to when that's going to be. But this other track, which is what happens with this property, it isn't even out of the starting blocks yet. And so I think it is interesting to us that sort of gets initiated, that some
Yes.
parallel conversation is occurring about how that's going to be disposed.
I would agree with that.
So that not when they open the doors to a new building, they go, oh, look, we haven't dealt with this. We're just going to deal with that now.
Yeah, without being too specific about the purpose, Carl, I can agree. But I think in general terms, we should get an expression of intent in some form or a communication.
I think these tapes serve as a
Okay.
record of that. Right? I think that's enough. You know. So let's move on. We have the next item on the agenda.
So no vote on that topic.
No vote, I don't think, on that. I think we've expressed in these meetings our interest in seeing some activity regarding the disposition of the ultimate disposition of that property. Okay.
Just parenthetically there, and lastly, there have been a couple of cases, with various properties that have been sold by academic institutions. Newbury College is one that was in the paper recently, sold their campus, I think, in Brookline, right? And used the proceeds to fund other town objectives, like affordable housing. And so this is not uncharted ground. This has, and I believe the city of Boston has done the same thing. So it's not breaking new ground. It's
Catholic Church has done likewise. So, okay.
Yeah.
All right. The calendar that you see here comes in two forms. It comes in a FinCom only form, and then there's a second page which is all events, this is prepared by the town manager, and I think if Carrie wants to come and just sit and bring it to our, these are things that we've already scheduled. It's in a very, fine set of points, but it includes everything right up to and including town meeting. So this is the full calendar. We've been working off a calendar that pretty much just took us to about December to get us over the hump of all of our guidelines meetings, and when are we voting for preliminary, when are we voting final, and when are we hearing from each of the different budgeting entities. But now this pushes the calendar all the way out through the town meeting and all the hearings. So that's really what this is. So there you go. Okay. Are there any questions on this? There's
one change.
There's a point that was raised by the finance director. She would like to move out one of our dates, which would kind of double up a guidelines meeting with the regular meeting.
Right.
So I think that was the date.
Well, It's November 7th and
7th,
November
yeah,
14th. So
14th.
do we want to double it up on the 14th?
Right.
Or do we want to have two separate meetings?
Right.
That's the decision in front of us.
Right. So, well, this is written with her moving it out
With two meetings.
to the
two-
14th
And then us having, swapping in our regular meeting.
on the 7th. Yeah. So, in our previously published schedule, we had a guidelines meeting with the town manager's response to our tentative guideline, I believe on November 7th. And then we had, the other meetings going along here. I think our regular meeting was the 14th. So we've swapped the regular meeting with the 14th meeting. Is everybody okay with that? I don't think it's any, this is actually
So does
odd.
that mean that the one that's currently on this list of the 14th is actually the 7th?
The one that we had published prior was, had a guidelines subcommittee meeting on the 7th.
On the
And the
7th,
finance
okay.
director felt that when we vote the tentative guidelines on October 24th, that the time between the vote of the tentative guideline and her being able to prepare and present at our next guidelines meeting on the
Gotcha.
7th was too tight to get any,
Thank you.
scrubbing of the budget based on our tentative guideline. The other, the superintendent's response goes out to the 21st. They have much more time to work with it, and she was being squeezed. So we flipped a regular meeting and a guidelines meeting. Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
We'll work with this schedule. Our next up on our agenda item. Okay. So 5-year tax projection. I've asked Carrie, is she here? She's not here. There she is. I've asked Carrie to just give us an update. Last year, it was a bit of a race to the finish line with the 5-year tax projection. And it has always been a very, I'll just call after the fact sort of a process. The budget, the guidelines are set, the budget proposals are all sort of ironed out, the warrant articles are finalized, what we call the fixed items in the budget are understood. We have good information about the split between Carlisle and Concord, and we then plug these numbers into the model and then make our assumptions. What do we think the growth of this might be, or the healthcare costs, and we make our assumptions. We'd like to try to make this a little bit more dynamic so that it might be useful to us during the guidelines process. Not sure if we can get there this year, but I'd like to hear anything from you, Carrie, on that. If you have any comments on how we might be able to interact with this 5-year model while we're doing the guidelines process. We just for the record, we have interacted since I've been on the committee. We've interacted during the guidelines process with a model provided by the finance director that has a few very basic numbers that we can see. We can see what kind of tax increase is projected. We can see what kind of levy limit drawdown we will be up against if we vote a certain guideline number. And these are very basic things that we can see and we work with. But that is not the 5-year model. It doesn't show us, a 5-year projection of taxes. Like, we only see what the next year's increase might be, but we don't see what the arc of 5 of those years is going to be. We just see that. So we might be able to enhance what we work with during the guidelines process if we can aggressively work with the model. But I'm not sure if that's something that we could do.
Can I ask a question? Does the current model include estimates of excluded debt and its impact on property tax?
Yes.
It does?
Yes.
So how do you estimate that?
Oh, well, do you mean for projects that have not been approved?
Yes.
No,
No.
no, it
It does
doesn't.
not.
It's
It
never-
Those are the
it's
big,
never-
okay, so those, okay.
And
So even if you were to do it now and you knew that there was good probability that we would be going forward with the middle school. That would not be baked into this methodology. Is that a fair statement?
It certainly could be, but I think I would call that out on its own.
So it's not.
So that
So this-
it's not at this point, but anything can be added
So
into the model.
I'll make a comment on that. The interesting conundrum there is that when we build this model, we have to publish the 5-year projection in the Finance Committee report. That's what we do. So the model's built around the assumption that the town manager's budget, there's 2 school budgets, will be approved. So we build it on that basis. And then we ignore warrant articles which may well be approved.
Right.
We just ignore them for excluded debt. So it's sort of a not, so we could say, okay, here are the excluded debt articles that are on the warrant. Should we assume that they are also approved?
Well, going
That's tough. That's tough.
No, by the time we publish the Finance Committee report, those articles will be available.
I just meant in terms of using this model to work on the
To work on the guideline. Yeah, it's unlikely that we would have those during the guidelines process.
So,
why don't we have do we have a current baseline and then do the additions that might result as a result of the warrant articles? We don't,
yes, and we have looked at that.
but we don't
Past.
do that, or?
Well, I think,
We don't publish.
I think the issue is the forecast is based upon what has been approved for capital projects, plus our estimates for increases in operating costs. It does not currently contemplate large projects that have not been
The
approved.
baseline shouldn't, right?
Right.
Exactly.
And that, my suggestion would be, you should have an A model and a B model, so that, and it's certainly easy enough to do that. It's just hard to bake into a forecast decisions that have not been
Right.
made, because it could be very misleading to the public.
On the other hand, though, not ignoring them and publishing a number is misleading too, because we know that a lot of these capital projects
I think
are likely to be
when
approved.
you did the back testing to sort of see.
Yeah, how accurate are we?
Is our prediction. The big variable, and it was a pretty big
Right.
difference, was exactly that. So that's a little
Right.
bit of the problem.
Yeah,
We
it's-
know the projection doesn't really work out to be what it is because we
Exactly.
exclude these
So
items.
it kind of dilutes the integrity of what we're projecting,
Right.
because we're publishing something that projects a 5-year tax rate when in fact it's missing
Right.
some pretty big things.
And we need to see language that this does not imply that these are, the finance committee approves of these items either, right?
That's
We'll-
true,
We'll
too.
make our own
That's-
determination on each warrant article as to whether or not we support it.
But then it begs the question, are we selective as to what goes into that forecast that we have? I mean, at what point can you just decide which warrant items are credible and which are not? You just throw them all in there.
Well, if you put them all in, but discreetly, you're built, so you have a baseline, and then you can
Yes.
add incremental ones, so the public
Yes.
can clearly see what the incremental effect is if you pull one out or all of them get passed, et cetera. So you don't have to make a judgment yourself as to what may or may
Well,
not
we've done
pass,
that,
right?
like the middle school projected debt service last year. We weren't terribly proactive about sharing that with the town meeting, but it was available.
We didn't publish it though in the finance committee
Well,
report.
that's what I meant.
Right.
So, but
So
should
it
we,
was-
should we
it was-
make
it was
it
an
focused
inside.
to have the baseline and then have the
No.
incremental?
I think separating it from, the forecast is one thing,
Right, the baseline.
Basically.
baseline or the forecast of what we know now. And then we show, and we've done it, and I think it's a really good idea that we do that, what the impact of the debt service is.
In the short term, we can go by the warrant articles that we think. It's when we get out 2, 3, 4 years that I think be a challenge.
Are we, when we calculate it right now, it includes the 7 to 8% of the debt that we have available on an annual basis, right?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so that's in there already.
Right.
So really what is missing would be any of the long-term.
The excluded-
The excluded debt, which would be kind of the large projects,
Right.
which the task force that's working on the long-range capital planning process, or also, and the numbers, they actually, if they do their work and have it in March, it might not help this year, it might be too late, but it could be a separate document. But that information also, if that's done by project, and I know that this was brought up at the select board meeting the other night, that it could be handled in such a way that they have each project, and then you can say, all right, if this project is added in, we can do, this is what it's gonna be. So I think we could use that information to help us going forward. And it might be a little bit late if they really wait and, if they don't have their work done until the March timeframe. But if they do have it done then, we might have a small document that talks about, all right, this is what you can expect, or this is what we anticipate. And it's kind of still, all the balls are up in the air, but at least people would have some numbers that they could look at.
So based on this conversation, I think there's actually two separate threads here. One is, how are we doing at communicating with the community about, large chunky debt service problems that we have not traditionally put in our model? That's one, and that's kind of an outward disposition. The other was, can we use this modeling methodology to inform us during the guideline setting process? And based on what I'm hearing here, we're a little more interested in making sure we do a good job for the town in publishing the most accurate projection we can publish, and we should probably stick with the methodology we're using so far to do guideline setting, which is a little more simplistic. It does not involve quite as rigorous a method. What is that?
I
What do
agree.
you think about that?
I think that was
So there just really are
well
two
said, yep.
things, and I think that this still means that the modeling activity is something that's almost an after the fact. The warrant articles are well understood. We see, we've been through the guidelines, and now we can start to really, focus on, okay, if this big thing goes, and then that means in 3 years they're going to need a lot of money to build a middle school. What does that mean? Mm-hmm. We can work with that then, but we don't have to necessarily pull it up into the October, November multiple meeting window that we're going to be stepping into soon. I think we can kind of hold on that.
Would that be an ideal state to get to, though?
It
That's
would.
what I'm
I
wondering.
think it would, but
So
yeah.
it requires a deliberate saying, hey, maybe we can't do it now, but maybe we should set up the model so in essence it almost can be updated twice a year, right?
Yeah, it could
So
certainly.
that you have a baseline and you have a mid-year sort of baseline
You could do it
for
at
the
any
discussions.
time.
Yeah, but there's this.
A question for, not for now, but for later, like, winter time. When we're starting to think about our report, is whether we include those projections in the report. which
The
we didn't do last
At the risk of really confusing the public, right now we have the midline, what we would call a high projection and
Well,
a
this
low
is
projection.
separate from the projection.
Okay,
This is the impact of this article in terms of debt service
right.
in, X number of years, and this other article, this is the impact in
Right.
terms of debt service. The impact of the debt service on taxes. That's the thing.
So almost on a per article basis, you're suggesting, Carl, that we say, okay, if this article passes, it'll be costing you as the median taxpayer this many dollars per year to service this
Add them
debt.
all up
Right.
into
Yeah.
That's a separate thing.
And have a slideshow.
So what the grafters do.
You do have a chart in your report that shows the impact of spending at different increments.
We do. We do.
It's static because it's in print, but
Yeah.
it's available.
But it's not on like it's not
It
it's not in
doesn't-
our commentary of each article. This article will cost you, $2 a year to service this debt.
You have to flip back to the page and know the page is there and calculate the debt service for this particular article, and it's a lot of page flipping.
Yeah.
But I have a question about integrating this into the guideline process. Are we suggesting that, based on what we learned from excluded debt, it would influence our guideline? So are we trying to say that our operating spending should be somehow influenced by what?
No, I think this is a separate thing, Mary. I think I tried to separate them.
Yeah, you did, but
so
I'm still-
what we deal with when we work on the guideline is the
Operating.
is the expected increase percentage in taxes this year. And we
Right.
see a column that just, all these different numbers, and if you go with this level, you're going to take off this much levy limit, your tax rate's going to move to this, your median household taxes will be X. But if you were to extend that particular thing that we work with, and you were to say the taxes will go up this much this year, this much next year, this much for the next 5,
Right.
you'd have 5 more numbers that you'd be seeing on that same, during that guideline setting process.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we'd be working with
Okay.
a more elaborate, stream of numbers
I
to
see.
look at. We go, okay, if we move the number this year down to here, what does that mean for 5 years?
Got it.
If it's on this line, it's going to be this.
But we're still within operating.
We're still working with those operating
Okay,
numbers.
okay.
I don't think we're trying to change that. But
Okay.
we're for now, I don't think we're there, and I don't expect to be there this year, but I think that's a good goal, and Parshar has been pushing that rock for us, so thank you. But I do think that we should really work this year at trying to anticipate some of this excluded debt and the variations that it might, and find ways to get that information into our report so that people have a good understanding of what those possibilities are, because we are up against some pretty good size, especially in light of the prioritization that the select board just went through on capital items and we'll get to that.
Well, I think you're in a much better position this year to do that than last year because the middle school project is moving forward.
All right.
I think it's safe to assume that at some point, probably in year 4 or 5, there would be a significant impact. And maybe by the time we're putting the report together, we might have an idea, is it really 90 million? Is that really a good number?
So does that mean, I thought I heard Carrie suggest a Model A and a Model B.
Yeah, I think so. I think
Is that,
Yeah.
that was the,
we will try to work with
so
some,
Model A would be
the
current
baseline, sort of a
form,
baseline,
for
and then
guideline
some other
purposes.
modeling that includes these unapproved, large excluded items that we are anticipating. And we'll try to do
Good.
something like that.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay? Okay.
It's a good start.
So, the next item on our process review is fiscal sustainability goals and process for the 19 and 20 year. So we started, I think we were off to a good start this year with, we've established that we would use our July numbers, and Mary and I recalculated them, even though the meeting, we kind of roughed it out at 1.8%. They came out at 2.16, and we put those in those guideline information request letters, 2.16, and it was well documented with footnotes as to where the numbers came from and all of that. I think it came out well. We had discussed at the last meeting that we should have set up a public hearing so that we push this out, so that we tell the town exactly how it is we're going about this process, and we solicit feedback for how we might be able to improve it. So we hold a public hearing. We held one. Tom Tarpey led a public hearing before we even started this a year or two ago over at Harvey Wheeler, and we should do it again. And we decided to do it again at the last meeting. But in the interval, I'm not able, even as the chair with my august role, to just set a date for a public hearing and then push out information. So I think we should tonight try to establish a date for a public hearing and vote on it. And then I can get something out to the paper and publish it, and we can move forward. I was unable to really do it because I didn't have a date to put in any kind of advance notice.
So get something to the paper in the form of a guest
Like
commentary.
a guest commentary, this is what the sustainable growth rate is. This is how we're using it as,
I
as a,
think the previous public hearing was preceded by a guest commentary by Tom that I think set the stage and
right.
got people's attention.
So what we need to do is come up with a date. We have a very full calendar between now and December, but I think we should try to find something in maybe October, or, it could be, I don't want to stretch it too far. We're very busy. But, so let's look at our calendar and see if there's a hole that we can find. Now, one thing about our process, we have a regular meeting to vote the tentative guideline on the 24th of October. And then we have another regular meeting just because of the flip of these two things.
Yep.
On the Thursday. What if we held a public hearing on that night instead of we don't have how much more business do we have?
You're talking November 7th.
So November 7th.
Yeah.
What do you
No.
think about that? Because we have a regular meeting
You're right.
and then we have another regular meeting. So, and they're pretty short between. So I think this could be used, given that we've flipped these around, that we could use this slot. And we've, anybody, what do you think about that? We call I don't even know if we need a business meeting that night. I don't know if we have any more regular business within 2 weeks of the previous meeting. And we'll have another regular meeting on December 5th. So, it is a little bit of a stretch, but
Well, maybe like town meeting, if something came up at the last minute, we could hold a
yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
prior
yeah.
to the public hearing.
Yeah.
And then continue with it.
Yeah. Okay.
So you're thinking of doing this at the Harvey Wheeler?
Harvard Wheeler, 7:00 in the evening, if we can get it. I don't know. I'd have to look at they may have some events that have already been scheduled, so that might not be the place we do it, but I'm sure we can find a venue. We could do it out here. We could do it out in
That's right.
in the select hall out here.
Yeah.
And that doesn't ever seem to be used while we're meeting in here. So we could find a home for that. So do I need a motion on that to schedule this? Or I can just schedule it.
I think
We can just all agree here. We'll
Yeah.
schedule it. We'll schedule it.
Great.
Okay, and I'll write a piece that promotes it and looks for attendance, tries to get people out of their cars.
And do you have a specific topic or objective in mind with this public
Well,
hearing?
the main, I think the main thing is just to introduce the fact, to reintroduce the fact that we're serious about this, that we've taken steps to introduce it within the budgeting process already, that we're trying to do our best to manage the financial well-being of the town towards its own best interests. And that's the goal of this thing. It's sustainable, a growth of the tax rate, which is sustainable, which keeps the town character and characteristics that the public would like to see.
Might it include Dee's earlier point on possible monetization of a surplus
I
property?
think that's a separate question. I just think that's my opinion. It just seems like that muddies the waters. I think this is a generic. I mean, obviously there are methodologies you could employ to try and achieve sustainable fiscal methods, but and so that might be one.
Question, during this hearing or during this presentation that you're making, what if people start saying, well, okay, it's 2.16%. Are you gonna hold the town and the school to that?
No.
And should there be something like, no, I'm just saying, how do you respond to people when they say, all right, you've told us this is really good information. Yes, if that's what we're looking at, that kind of a trajectory with a 2.1% or 2.16%, then how firm are you going to be, or what do we have to do to ensure that? How do you answer a question?
Our authority is pretty limited, Dee. We're just we're doing what we can to, in effect, advise the community, and in that way, we're advising the budgeting entities that this is our hope, You know, we're just, it's aspirational in that sense. I don't know that we have any way to enforce anything other than to say, we vote no action on your proposal, which we could do if they come back with, you know, a 4% budget that just ignores all of that. But we could also evaluate in our guidelines process and say, okay, there's a lot of squeeze here. We really think that 2.55 is, those are okay numbers for your operating budgets, and we ignore our own, you know, advice. So it is, you know, but we are doing our best to try to do something that's proactively looking out for the town as a future planning, process. That's all. And I think it's a good idea.
So I agree with what you outlined in terms of what you'd want to stress, I guess. So if I'm reading this blind, if you will, are you convening the hearing to inform me as a member of the public, or are you seeking my input?
Well, I think it's there's a dual purpose, because obviously there are many people in the town who are not that familiar with the budgeting process. This whole idea of going through a series of meetings with the budgeting entities and setting objectives and guidelines, and then having them, you know, try to work with us to meet those is completely alien. It's not something that they understand.
But
So,
if you're seeking my input,
right.
how is it going to influence the cycle that we're in now? I guess that's the question I would ask, right? So a little bit like Dee was saying, say, hey, you guys decided 2.1 or 2.2.
Right.
I think it should be 5. Is it too late to influence your input? You see what I'm saying? People may be wondering, like, is it too late for this cycle? Why are you asking me now versus
Because
when
we
should
have,
you ask?
because we've already set it and put it in the budgeting proposal, the budgeting information letter. So that this year's cycle is well down the road.
No, I know,
So
but I'm just
this,
saying
hearing is to
anticipate-
sort of set us up, because as we move into the, you know, into the hearings window or whatever, we will have some regular meetings, and we should be setting ourselves to the point where, okay, we will be setting this number for the next cycle, for the next year. And if we get some feedback from the hearing that says, you guys are all wet, the methodology that you have selected and a better methodology is proposed, and we discuss and we decide to tweak, we then would be in the next year's cycle using an maybe improved, we can call it improved, but maybe different methodology. So I think it's one of these continuous improvement things where we're just getting started with this. This is our first shot, and we took it. And next year, maybe we can do better. And we're always looking to do better.
I am concerned, though, that I think I think the reason we're having this hearing is to listen to what people think about
absolutely.
this. But I am a little bit concerned about it turning into a debate on how we calculate the number. And I think I've said that before. So, because I believe that there is no right number. I mean,
That's fine.
so I just want to be careful that when we go there, that we spend we budget the right amount of time to hear people and what they think about this idea. Is this something that resonates with people, or are we okay with increased? I mean, this is a legitimate question that we should be putting out there, and I'm leery of it turning into a debate about how we calculate the number. I mean, I guess I'm open to changing the way we decided to we discussed it. As intelligent people, and we came up with a number, a way to calculate the number. And it seems like every time we talk about sustainability, we kind of get detoured into calculating it a different way. So are we open to that, or
Well, another alternative is to provide, and this can be part of the outreach thing that ends up in the paper, is to provide some feedback loop where people can provide us with direct feedback through email or some other kind of collection, some other collection methodology where they can send us to a Google Doc or something where they could say, hey, I have this really fabulous way of doing it, and then put it on a spreadsheet. We got this from this person, and there's definitely ways that
Can we take information in without it becoming a debate?
Yeah, exactly.
Tell me, you think.
Thank
it
you.
should be,
You just say thank you.
Okay, okay. Thank you, thank you.
We just call it public comments, and you don't have to answer the question.
Exactly.
No, but I think it's
But-
important to set our expectations.
Yes,
Because that's where I think we run into trouble.
Right.
So I understand the informed part, but if all we're gonna do is, hey, we got a mailbox, send your comments in, and we're not gonna talk about it, then we just, we need
I
to
think
be
it's fine
clear
to
about
have,
that.
to have people give us their suggestions, but we don't have to debate them. That's all.
No, we don't have to get into it. We don't have to get into a debate at the hearing.
Sure. Well, I guess just being clear, so I guess what I'm saying is if I show up like that, and I know the process here, right? But if I don't know it, and you're not clear as to what you're expecting me to provide input on, and whether my input
Right.
is gonna affect this year's cycle or not,
Right.
then there's the wrong set of expectations perhaps.
Well,
So
right.
we should be clear
Yep.
that, hey,
This is
this
a
year,
long
this year's already done.
Yeah, this is locked and
Right,
loaded. Right.
and for next year,
Mm-hmm.
we would like to maybe even do this in June, I'm making that up, but a little bit earlier, so the input can actually influence
Right.
the guidelines that we give.
No,
Is that what we're trying to say? And if so, we should just be clear in the letter that you write, right?
Right.
That's all I'm saying.
Right.
Otherwise,
It did
folks are
go
gonna come in.
into our letters that we sent out.
Right.
Back.
And
in-
it was set.
Yes,
And it
it
was
did.
set.
Yeah.
And it's,
So it is influencing this year's budgeting cycle. But the thing is, it's a long-term activity or process. So that sustainable growth rate is something really to be looking at. We're supposed to be doing it 5-year rolling average.
Right.
So we're at least looking 5 years ahead and trying to say, okay, this is the sweet spot that we're trying to find over 5 years.
I just suspect the
Explain
average
that.
member of the public doesn't know that. And so just setting their expectations is all I'm suggesting. Make sure we're clear on the expectations for the meeting.
I think this whole conversation about sustainable growth rate started with the Randall curves.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Which showed the big gap happening between, so, and then we got off on, well, then we should be publishing a guideline, and how do we calculate that, right? And now we're thinking about how to calculate that, and we oftentimes, it's frustrating to me that we start talking about what's the right way to calculate that number instead of getting the conversation back on, look, our taxes are growing up a lot faster than any other metric that we're looking at. So I hope that the expectation for the meeting is to move the conversation to that, to tell people, is this something that concerns you? Right?
I think there are also the implications associated with it. If you look now, at what was the tax rate last year? It was like 4%. So now we're saying it really, from a sustainability standpoint, it should be 2.16. So people are scratching their head. I'm just
Yes.
trying to, I'm in the audience, I'm scratching my head. All right, it was 4% last year, now they want 2%. Okay, but what happens when we have a new middle school? What's gonna happen then?
Right.
That's where the mind will start going.
Right.
So how does, and what did you
But
say?
if you look again at this Randall curve, which maybe, I don't know, maybe we should be distributing it again to every new member. But it's not, it shows a not sustainable situation.
And I
over
understand
the
that.
years.
So then you say, okay, so now we have this new middle school. So what will be the impacts and implications for the town and the schools associated with that? Would it mean we're gonna be cutting back on services? Because if we wanna keep it at that amount? I just don't know where this conversation is gonna be going when we're talking to the public about it, because generally they are at town meeting or they're watching some of the meetings on TV, and I'm not sure how
It's
how it
complex.
plays out or what we think will happen in the future.
I think we do a
It's-
disservice to the community if we don't have some level of outreach and interaction.
Oh, I agree with
that
that. I just
in
don't
it.
know how how do we have to think about it before going into that meeting?
Well, we have until November 7th to do the thinking. So, and we have plenty of meetings between now and then.
I just think it feels like, so I've only been looking at this stuff for a year, so I came after the Randall curve and that stuff happened, but it felt to me like last year, you know, we were always talking to ourselves about this.
Yes.
And we never really understood whether anybody cared, and I have, you know, the evidence that I have from attending the couple of town meetings that I've attended is they don't.
Right.
So I think it, to me, so I mean, they, you know, everything gets voted, right? So, not everything, but most of the big stuff gets voted. So, you know, there's no, most of the stuff that doesn't, exactly. So, I think one of the questions I have is, are we out of touch with what the community actually is thinking? In other words, to them, if a
Yes.
5% or 6% growth is just fine, we need to hear that. And I think, for me, that's the purpose of having this.
Are we out
discussion.
of touch? Or the other thing is, we haven't been starting the right conversation with people to give
perhaps.
people who do care a voice.
Agreed. So
Okay, so let's-
that's why I'm interested in it.
Let's find, I mean, let's find out by,
And, you know, you can't control public dialogue. I agree with you. And I agree you should try and prep for it as much as you can, but we can't control it, right? It's going to be what it is. But we want to find out, what do you think?
right.
I think, yeah.
Well, I think there's another.
Can you get a mic?
I think there's another useful purpose, which is, you know, remember, Peter, you were telling us when you were on a school committee, you could have used some guidance, some help going into negotiations with the unions. And if you remember that labor costs are what, 70% at least of 80% of the
about 80.
budget. Well, you don't want, if your labor costs are growing 4 or 5% a year, you're not going to constrain the budget. Everything else becomes
Exactly.
point. So I think that if you continue to press this, okay, we want it, 2%, 2%, 2%. When they're going to negotiate the contracts, they can say 2%, 2%, 2%, not 4%, not 5%, 2%. And maybe then you don't get, for example, cost of living increases of 2.5% when the cost of living didn't go up. Right? So this can be helpful in other ways.
I think we need to move on. It's 8 o'clock, and we've made a decision to hold a public hearing on November 7th, so that's good. We've made some headway on that item.
We don't need a motion, right?
No, we decided we don't need a motion. I'll work with the town to set up a hall or a place for us to do it. Okay, we have 3 pieces of correspondence. We actually have 4, I believe. So the first one that's on the list is from Brooks Reed. Brooks Reed is a resident who is being impacted by the Estabrook Woods litigation. Mr. Reed.
Mr. Reed is.
Yeah, so I think we've all read this. Just to summarize for those at home who don't have a copy, the primary goal of Mr. Reed's proposal is to establish a warrant article for this year's town meeting. And that warrant article would request that in any litigation decision, that those involved in making that decision sign off in a formal way that they believe this to be a valid purpose and not a trivial matter which would be considered to be fruitless or just useless. Because in the event that we end up with a disposition in a judicial setting where it's with prejudice, we could end up paying the litigation costs of the defendants themselves. And so that's the proposal on the table. And Mr. Reed, would you like to address your proposal? We're here to hear you.
Yes, so this came about because 2019 annual town meeting, there was a handout for the affordable housing articles, the 4 articles, and there was a a note in there about how in the town of Sudbury, taxpayers had to pay defendant legal fees in a case the town of Sudbury brought against some people who were fighting or were in favor of a 40B development on their property. And so a decision was made behind closed doors. No one in the public could tell what was being discussed. The select board essentially made up a phony story, and the taxpayers ended up having to pay defendant legal fees of the case. And this is not the only possibility that could occur. Town council could misguide the select board, so the select board didn't actually know what was going on, and cause the select board to vote in favor of a lawsuit which actually had no basis whatsoever. And I think it would be important for a certification to be made by all persons present behind closed doors to certify that they all understood the basis of the lawsuit and that they understood the legal and factual basis for bringing the lawsuit. I think, as the lawyers in the room will know, that lawsuits are based on facts and the law, and it's important that everybody know what's going on in the room who's behind closed doors. Otherwise, we're likely to run into this problem that Sudbury had, where if the lawyer for the town had known that Sudbury had made up, the select board had made up the information about the lawsuit may not have continued. The same thing could happen in the town of Concord. And I think that there's some things I didn't write in my email, which I've thought of in the meantime. One of them is that a key aspect of this article, if we were to pursue it, would need to be a written statement by town council given to the select board and town manager explaining the basis of the lawsuit, so that if in the end the lawsuit turned out to be frivolous, like any good process, you could go back and see what went wrong. And it would be important to have written documentation of how the select board made their choice to file the suit, what information they had when they made that choice. That's one thing that I didn't mention. The other thing I didn't mention is, I think this is important, that if we do an article on this, it's important that the language of the article track the relevant statute. The relevant statute is Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 231, Section 6F, which is costs, expenses, and interest for insubstantial, frivolous, and bad faith claims defenses. So that if we have an article, it's important that the language of the article specify that the certification match the wording of the law that's relevant here, so that the certification would really be certifying that this law was being complied with. So that's another thing that would have to be in the article. And then another thing I didn't mention is there'd have to be some periodic certification. It might be when the lawsuit's filed. It might be annual, say at the time the annual town report is produced. It might be at the end of the term of the town council in May. Because of course, one town council might be going out and another one replacing them. And that's when you'd want the town council to certify that up to that point, everything had been good with the lawsuits. So the value in this would come from the fact that if the town did end up paying the costs of the defendants, if the attorneys had certified it wasn't frivolous and it turned out to be, I think it would give the town a much stronger position against the law firm to recover the costs of, say, paying back the defendants. Anyway, that's sort of what's motivating it.
So the main, just to bring it up to a high level, the main goal of this is to mitigate the risk to the town of being found to have filed something frivolously. Right. And that's really your goal, is to just, protect the towns from doing things that would later be found to be of a frivolous nature, putting us at risk, putting us at financial risk.
Is this process in place in any other town?
I'm not aware of it. I looked to see if anything was like this, and I haven't found anything.
So I have a question. So if I'm a town official or town council or town manager, and I sign this, but then later a judge rules it was indeed frivolous, even though I signed it and said it wasn't, like, what liability is there for me, and like, how does that protect the town? That's what I'm a little confused on.
So in order to,
I'm not a lawyer, by the way.
yeah, okay, so the idea is to make sure there's a process in place by which information about the basis of the lawsuit is communicated to all persons who are in that closed-door room when the decision is made. And by having that process and making sure that that process is a written document form, then I believe it will hold everyone to a much higher standard than, for example, town council comes in and says, well, you got a great case here and you should go for it. Well, there's no written basis by which you could have recourse against town council if that turned out to be a frivolous lawsuit.
Well, if there are minutes of that conversation, which in an executive session minutes are kept, then that statement by the town council would be recorded. So this is where I am concerned that this extra step, I'm not sure what it actually gets us, other than somebody has to think deeply about, am I on board with this? Which they should be doing. They're doing in the business of the town. It's their, they're not, and
I'd like to address the part about the minutes. If you look at at what executive session meeting minutes have been approved in the town, you'll find that at least a dozen sets of executive session minutes have not been approved after 2.5 years now. And very shortly, the last 2 select board members who are in those meetings will be leaving office. We never will know what really happened in those meetings. They'll never be properly approved. There is a severe problem with following through on the approval of executive session minutes in the select board. So I'm actually going to be introducing 2 additional articles. One is that a requirement that executive sessions be recorded because there are so many executive sessions which have not been approved years after they occurred. And then another warrant article, which I can't think of right now, but again related to executive sessions. Oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay.
so I guess my question to you, Mr. Reed, is what action would you like on the part of the Finance Committee? I mean, I understand your concern. I'm not sure I'm on board, so to speak, with the proposal, but what would you like us to do? We've spent 7 minutes on this. I'm not, I'm happy to have us have a conversation about it, because if there's a sense of the meeting here that we should somehow be writing a warrant article or, supporting your proposal, we can have a motion on that. So I need to move forward. I think we understand what you're looking for. Is that what you're looking for us to be the promoters of a warrant article?
If you are interested in pursuing that, that is what I would like.
That's what you would like. Okay. Let's have some conversation if we will, and we'll see where we want to go with this.
I just want to ask just the immediate question to this, and respectfully, I would just want to ask the question, how is this germane to us? Because this sounds like a policy decision that needs to be made, and it doesn't really have a financial impact on the town per se. So how is this relevant to this committee?
Well, so it wasn't clear to me which committee I should go to get sponsored. And the first thing that occurred to me is you'd had some very prolonged discussions about transparency in the lawsuit, the Estabrook Woods lawsuit, about 20 minutes each in the last 2 meetings. And it seemed to me that you had a great deal of concern about the cost of the lawsuit, the transparency of the process. And it seemed to me that you had an interest more than any other committee in town in the essentially making sure that all this stuff is transparent around lawsuits and the expenses involved. And so I thought that you might be the right committee to consult.
Christine?
So, yeah, the transparency, I do think that's in our bailiwick, because we do think about, the financial aspects of the town and what gets spent and how that is discussed with the folks who live here, and when are budgets put forward. And we had a lot of discussion around when there was a special town meeting and there was an adjustment to the legal reserves, and we had discussion at that time, even before these last 2 meetings, about whether that was the right number or not. So I think we are interested in transparency and having the right amounts accrued in the budget for expenses that are able to be estimated and are probable. And I'm an accountant, so I think that way in terms of how you think about reserves. So I think that aspect of it we're interested in. The part about whether the select board and their attorneys make the right decisions, to me, feels like I'm telling them how to be a good manager, and I don't think that is the role of the finance committee. I hear your concerns, but that to me seems a little bit afield of what we do. The townspeople elect the select board. They elect them for their ability to manage the town properly. Certainly evaluating lawsuits and deciding when to have them and whether they are frivolous or not is absolutely part of their management role. So that one feels like I can't get to that part.
Okay, so let me say this about that. There was an actual case in Sudbury. It's happened 2 years ago. The taxpayers did pay defendant legal expenses because a group of people behind closed doors made up a false story.
Yep, and they should not elect them again, right? So your ability to control it is who you vote for, I think.
I'd like to recognize the person in the back here, but after you speak, I'd like to take this offline and have the Finance Committee conduct its business around this topic. And if we want to do anything about it, we need to come to a quick conclusion and then move forward. So what would you like to say? Go ahead.
I just want to speak to Mr. Taylor's comment of why it would be of interest to the Finance Committee. Damages are triple, and that's what comes out of the tax base will be triple the legal fees and damages. It's not going to be an inconsiderate.
But any bad decision will have an impact on the town, right?
They're not usually times 3.
Okay, but I get it.
Maybe like the taxes, maybe people don't care.
Well, there's other
Could be.
decisions that they make. They make all kinds of decisions that impact us financially. So
They do.
they have, and we
Absolutely.
elect them to do it, right? So
So what I'd like to do now, because I think we have an idea what the proposal is, Mr. Reed, I'd like to have us take it in here. If there is a motion that anyone would like to make, we can then have discussion on the motion. Otherwise, we're going to move on to the next piece of correspondence.
Comment?
Yeah.
The comment is, I would suggest that you really talk to the town manager or to the select board to get an understanding of the process and procedure used for executive session. My limited experience has been on the CPC, where we had executive session. It was recorded. We had minutes. We were not permitted to talk about the topic at all to anyone. And no information would be forthcoming from that executive session until after there was resolution. So litigation is an aspect where, it might not, a situation might not be resolved for 2 or 3 years. Minutes will not come out or be known to anyone until after that. So my comment is just to perhaps talk to the town clerk, talk to the town manager to find out what is the process. And then they would be able to tell you the process for executive session. And then how, and your question about how do you protect the taxpayer in that situation?
Okay, thank you very much.
Right. So I think if we have any further discussion, it's just going to be within the committee. But thank you for your correspondence and for your comments.
Thank you very much.
Anybody care to continue to make a motion? Is there anyone like to sponsor Mr. Reed's proposal as a warrant article?
So the measure that we've taken, I think, as a committee to try to achieve that objective of protecting the taxpayer has been to request that an actual estimate.
Right.
Right.
That is true. We
have
did. We
Rather
put
than
that in our
just-
information letter.
Rather than just a placeholder
Right.
number that
Right.
we then have to
Right.
revisit if should that be exceeded. So I think that's what we've done to achieve that objective. So I'm not a lawyer, nor did I play one on TV, but it seems beyond the scope of this committee to me.
Seeing no other person who seems to be making a motion, I think we're going to move to the next piece of correspondence. So thank you very much. In my response, I did give you some bad information, and I'm going to try to correct the record now. In the email that I sent back to you, I said that you can get this on the warrant for 10 signatures, and you can overcome an objection for 100. There is no overcoming an objection. If you get 10 signatures, it goes on the warrant. So you're good to go if you get 10 signatures. So that's all you need. Yep. What's that? Yes, for annual town meeting. If it's a special town meeting that gets called, it's 100 signatures. That's the level for 100 on it.
Good to know. What's next?
So the next piece of correspondence.
Planning board.
Oh, the planning board. So the planning board, okay. The planning board would like to get all of us together. They're looking for the FinCom, the Public Works Commission, the school committee, all in the same room to discuss their amendments, which are significant. I invited them to come here and present. And the response I received back from Elizabeth Hughes was, oh, that's not our intention. Our intention is to have everybody get together and we'll all discuss our proposals. So they're looking for a date. And
Have they seen our calendar?
yeah.
Find one. Find one.
So find one. I know she said in her response to me, she said it's like herding cats, and she's not wrong. I don't have it. The planning board article proposals they have two fairly significant ones that they're looking for, which is an accessory apartment proposal and a two-family by right in certain zones of the town, like the C zones of the town. And these are significant changes to try to encourage more affordable places for people to live. And just as an aside, I lived in an accessory apartment for the first 2 years out of college. I lived in a suburban house with 5 other people for the next 5 years. And it wasn't until I was 30 that I actually lived in a single family house with a single family. So these kinds of things are very rare in Concord. And to encourage that would be a good thing.
So what's the connection to us? I mean, is it going to have implications in the budget?
It is going to have financial implications for property owners who can more easily create accessory units on their property, and would also allow specific zones of town to have two-family rights. And that has significant financial implications for people who own property in those zones.
In schools.
And yeah,
Okay.
it does also.
It has
Yeah.
more
So.
people, yeah.
So they just, and they're doing a lot of outreach. This
It's
is,
ironic, because when I raised this topic to them at their meeting a couple weeks ago, they said they don't consider these kinds of things.
What?
planning board?
Yeah, the impact on.
Oh, the financial impacts? Oh, yeah.
Impact on schools or impact on finance?
Yeah.
So the only place you will
must have
find
given
that.
them the idea then.
Sorry?
You must have given them
Anyway,
the idea.
So
I was surprised when I read it.
we have a very tight schedule. I will do what I can to work with.
Try to schedule something.
Yeah, we
It's a
should-
very important issue.
It is. They really want to get all the boards in town trying to push this thing uphill. So when we come to town meeting, there's a really consolidated set of support that they have for these changes. Because getting a two-thirds vote is a pretty heavy lift, especially when you're making big changes in the town. And it could impact the character of certain neighborhoods and the way people treat their property.
It has significant financial impacts, but who
I just want
delineates
to ask the
that?
question: how is that germane to the finance committee? Because
It is a little marginal. I will say, I
I
agree.
just asked the question of our fellow residents over here.
Yeah.
Now I'm
Yeah.
hearing that the planning board wants us to opine on something that's not.
They've invited us to join a group conversation so that they get the best articles out that they can. They're just looking for input. And you can
They're-
say,
They're gonna initiate the article.
I asked them about this is because they want to do this to make housing more affordable and to actually increase the number of housing units in town.
Right.
So when I was sitting there, I'm thinking, okay, well, that means more residents, more demand for services, maybe more school-age kids coming in. And I think that all affects the town's finances. Maybe it's a marginal 5% or 3%.
No question. But I think when we're confronted with anything at the finance committee, my understanding is that we are for better or for worse, in many ways, we are reacting to what has actually been decided. And this sounds to me like we are trying to set policy around a decision that the select board would be weighing in on, which is not our job. So I just want to make sure that there's a level of fairness
Yes.
that we have around what we're actually going to opine on.
Yeah, fair enough.
And so to the extent that there's an impact happening at Estabrook or some other place, we just want to be mindful of that.
No, that's fine.
You know, and if it's the select board or if it's the planning board or it shouldn't matter. I mean, you know, if folks are going to want to listen, we need to be consistent about what we're doing.
That's fair, and I guess to tie it back to, and Dean's gonna kill me for this, but if we had a good budget model, this is a type of conversation. So, well, here's the impact of adding 100 more kids or these, so.
Yeah, no,
You're
I
right.
hear you. I hear you.
But I hear what you're saying too, I agree.
Just to make a point though, the increase in residency will be offset by an increase in assessed value of properties as well. So it's a balance that has to be
I think it
factored in.
depends in this case, because they're not all full, single-family homes, so it's complex. I'm
It's
not sure it'll
complex.
balance out, right? So, but I think it's just a good conversation to have with us and them and others, town boards and stuff, what they're trying to do.
Yeah, I'm not sure that means we need to have a meeting with them. I think it could be just you.
Yeah, you're
Parshar,
the
because
observer,
you're our liaison
We're
to,
happy to do that.
remind them that we're looking at the financial implications of
Well,
whatever.
they could invite us and we
That's right.
can go or not go as we choose to go. I think
I wouldn't go.
they're looking for, as Brian put it, for us to opine. And if some of us feel like that's not our place to be, that's fine.
I guess there are a couple things. One would be the implications in terms of
This is that
services
whistling noise.
and more
Crazy.
people and things like that in the town. But the other is, as they are going through these goals, there are going to be implications in terms of their staffing, their internal staffing.
Right.
So to me, that's directly related to what the town manager has to.
budget
They have
for.
to interface with the town manager. It has nothing to do with, and he sets the priority
Yep.
that come then in
Comes
his
to us.
budget to us.
Us,
So it seems to me that that would be the appropriate time that we may then have additional questions in terms of
Mhm.
their staffing requirements and things, or questions we may have for them in terms of the impacts associated, and that they're the ones who have to come up with the impacts. I don't think we're responsible for coming
No.
up with how many more houses do you anticipate in the next 3 years, or things like that.
Right. So, for now, I will get back to Ms. Hughes and say, plug us in for a date, and if any of us can make it, we might go. Just plug us in and we'll see what we can do,
The other way to think about the financial implications for the town is that the town has various affordable housing goals and aspirations, and whenever they try to get to any of them, in various ways, inevitably it comes back as a draw on the taxpayer. And if this could possibly be a way of coming to a compromise or consensus on certain changes in planning and zoning, that could be a non-cash way of addressing some of the town's affordable housing goals.
I think that's exactly what it is. It's a
they're
multi-pronged
doing it in-
approach to affordable housing.
Yeah.
You're saying, here's this pot of money that we created, the $500,000
Yeah.
warrant article last year, and the things we've pushed off to the state to
Yeah.
say, please approve these for us so we can get extra tax revenue. But this is a non-tax way of encouraging the private sector to maybe build an accessory unit in their house. Or,
Exactly.
Subdivide their big house on a big lot and
Yeah.
make it a two-family. So it's a way for the town not to have to always constantly be shelling out in order to achieve these goals.
Subsidized housing inventory.
That is
you're
probably
right.
true.
That's
They
probably
will
true.
probably not.
That's right. But still within the broader definition of affordable.
Yeah.
Right? So
Right.
worthwhile.
That's why I think it might be worth going to the meeting.
Anyway,
I think it would be good to just to communicate to the planning board that we're interested in learning what would be the impact on services through the town manager, And what would be the impact on growth in property taxes because of changes in assessed value? I think that's where we're focused.
I will get back to Elizabeth Hughes. So the last one is not, I don't think it's in the packet, is the, I think it was emailed out. Oh, it is in here.
It is in the packet. Yep.
Ellen Emerson, she had made requests.
Oh, I thought it was Lori. Go ahead. Sorry.
She had made requests for, some summaries of how much legal expense, and Carrie has responded to those. So I don't know that these really warrant a lot of conversation at this level.
Do you want to talk about Lori Hunter's?
Yeah, that didn't show up on my agenda, but yeah, we published I got an email, this was sent to me and Mary, which is the subdivision of the Concord and Carlisle populations and how that's going to impact their budgeting. It's going to go against us this year to the tune of about $279,000. So that's just a nut we have to overcome before they even spend a penny because of the variance in
That's
student
right.
populations.
So that's a 1.39% increase without spending any more money.
Yes, exactly, for us.
Right.
And just to comment on that, they had a consultant in sometime in May, I believe, who came and talked to them about what it would mean to open up their intermunicipal agreement that establishes the district. There's an amendment process that's built into that agreement. The outgoing chair said you really need to change the year-over-year shifting in the way each town is built. It should be a smooth 5-year rolling average or 3-year rolling average, some way to smooth out these impacts. If 10 students go down here and 15 come in here, you get these very nasty spikes, blips. And so he had suggested that they open up the agreement and use the amendment process to change it to a 5-year. But I've learned in doing a little bit of work on understanding that you don't just amend. If you amend your agreement, your amended agreement gets sent to the State Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, who gets to review it, and they will review it against current state specifications for how these agreements need to be written. And those have been rather massively modified since 1974, the last time our intermunicipal agreement was ever changed. So they would have to really revise the agreement substantially. And so there's some, it's just, I think they want to do it, but it's a slow process. And I think they're in the process of kind of moving in that direction, but it's going to take everybody, all hands on deck.
And I think at that meeting, they also, Lori also brought up the bus depot issue that we have raised. So that has been brought up also in conjunction with this idea of let's relook at the agreement. So
Right.
that's good news. They're listening to
Right.
our suggestion.
So
Great.
in looking at what would have to be stuck in there, which would happen, the town if you were to establish a multi-town district today, collective bargaining agreements could not be negotiated directly and solely by the school committee as ours does today. Each town would be allowed to send their town, not allowed, but required to send their town manager, if you're in a town manager style town. I don't know how it works with a city and a mayor and that kind of structure, but if you're in our kind of thing, I believe the town manager gets to participate in the negotiation for collective bargaining agreements, which is not how they do it today. The school committee does it themselves. So that would be a significant change in the way collective bargaining got done at the district. So, well, it would be a change. So, anyway, so that was the letter from Lori Hunter and a little bit of a riff on that. So now, Lori wanted to address us on FY21 revenues and fixed costs, and she may be in a position to do that, or I've asked her to give us a little bit of an update on her.
Harry
She stepped out for
stepped
the
out.
buzzing noise, I believe.
Oh, good for, thank
Are
her.
we supposed to address this other letter that we had?
The Estabrook
The
one?
second one that came?
I don't
Or is
have,
this just FYI?
Is that the Estabrook one?
Response
This
is already
is the
in there.
one for September 26th. No, this is a different one.
this is one that I think just came in my mailbox like today. Oh, it's
I'm not sure what
worse.
they're supposed to-
Carrie,
I'm
stop.
not sure what we're supposed to do about it, but
When do we get this?
I don't even know I have it.
today.
Oh.
This is the one that
It just, it was literally,
Stephen already
Wasn't part of the
responded to.
email. So
No,
Yeah,
it wasn't.
no.
It just showed up today.
Yes.
But tonight, it was in your
Responded
It
to.
was right here.
It was included in the
Where
packet.
is it?
Yeah, I think
oh,
the
this was
town,
not to us anyway. We were just CC'd on this,
Yeah.
on this.
So
This
we don't
is,
we don't
yeah.
have to do anything.
no, we-
Yeah, we were just being CC'd on this particular piece of mail. So that's not a,
Thanks.
oh. Carrie's not here. She's fixing things. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Harry. Fixed costs, revenues.
That happened
Oh,
last Wednesday. It's just brutal. So,
Hi.
we are at the point in our agenda where the FY21 revenue and fixed costs, but I thought that you would have some update on
Right, so
working with the new.
I came up without my computer, so it's not much of an update. We are working on the revenue projections and the fixed cost projections, and we do expect to have that available to you at your next meeting. As you can imagine, it's very difficult at this point in the year to put together anything that's worth anything when we don't even have the first quarter receipts. So we are in the process of that. We did get new growth, what we expect to have certified, and it's about $100,000 higher than what we expected for the current fiscal year, so that helps. We expect that in fiscal '20, we'll have an unused levy capacity of 3.71%, so that's a little bit higher than what you had expected based on the guideline that was voted. So when we start the projection for fiscal '21 for property taxes, we'll put in a number that maintains that 3.71% of unused levy capacity.
Sure.
I do have most of the revenue projections. We've done much better in building permits than I thought in fiscal '19. The problem is a lot of the building permits that are being pulled while we've had an increase in the receipts. It's not necessarily for things that are going to produce a lot of new growth, because it's a lot of minor remodels. A lot of, for instance, if you redo your kitchen, even if you're spending $100,000 on your kitchen, it's not increasing the value so much.
Nor does that feel minor.
I'm trying to get a $10,000 kitchen upgrade, and it's a struggle. I know people spend that kind of money on kitchen upgrades. So that's coming along nicely.
Do you use some kind of building permit input in your model for some leading indicator of new growth?
We don't have anything good, I would say. It's really frustrating when you see a big building permit number, but then the new growth the increase doesn't correspond.
For that reason, the nature of the permit.
Yeah, and I think it's a little different here than in my past experience. There used to be a more direct correlation from what I was used to seeing, with an increase in building permit meant a pretty similar increase in new growth, and that's not the case here because of what the permits are being pulled for.
It's largely due to renovation, and that doesn't really add to the grant list that much.
Yeah. On the fixed cost side, I think health insurance is the most difficult because it's just very, very early for health insurance. I can tell you on the OPEB contribution side, we actually are doing very well and really have been paying a little bit more than our annual or our actuarial determined contribution.
Yep.
So I do expect we had budgeted 1.69 million in fiscal '20. I do expect that to be 1.5 or even a little bit lower. I had a conversation with our actuary today, and I said, given that we're over what we really needed to contribute, perhaps we could look at lowering the discount rate from 7.25 to 7% and possibly shortening up the amortization from 2039 maybe back to 2035 and start there, because I don't want to have I can tell you the funding schedule says we should be budgeting about 1.2 million in fiscal '21, and that seems like it's probably a little lower than what we should be doing, because if we start messing around with the assumptions, then I don't want to have to go back up again.
Yeah.
But we won't have a new valuation in time for this budget cycle, so I'm just going to have to make some estimates. But I did want to introduce Stephen Crane, our town manager. If you haven't met him, he's the gentleman in the suit sitting patiently in the back. It might be good if he could just spend a couple of minutes talking to you about the beginning of the budget process and the budget instructions that he's issued to staff, that I think you will be pleasantly surprised with what he has to say.
What an introduction. Yeah, what a great introduction.
Plenty of room up here.
Good evening, members of the committee. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit about our FY21 budget instructions that were sent out, I think, last week. If anybody wants a little bit of brief biographical information, I'm happy to do that. Otherwise, we can just dispense with the formalities and I can get to the instructions.
Yeah, just,
Oh, I think
I'd
so.
like to hear.
Yeah, the bio.
The bio. Okay. So I started middle of August here in Concord. Before that, I was the town manager of Long Meadow for about 6 years, and Long Meadow is a suburb of Springfield, Western Mass. And I'm originally from Lowell, so this was a return to the area for me, and I'm very excited by the opportunity. And there was actually a couple of welcome receptions this evening as well. So I've gotten to get to know a few people in the community. It's been very fun and exciting, and we have a great organization, a great team here in the town. All throughout the town organization, but specifically here in Townhouse. And looking ahead at the budget, I have, Long Meadow has the highest tax rate in the Commonwealth, and so in terms of projections and kind of worrying about the near future, that's something I spent a lot of time doing there. So I was interested in hearing your conversation about that. Because of the pressure on our tax rate, Long Meadow also had a AA2 bond rating, so it was not profligate spending. It was a built-out community with low new growth and really flat property values because of the economic benefits that Concord and towns in this area have by being close to Boston, which has seen a lot of growth. Western Mass just isn't seeing that level of growth, and as you know, the denominator on the tax rate calculation is your full fair cash assessed value of the community. And if that number goes down, even if you haven't spent another nickel, your tax rate goes up. So a recession would really have a devastating impact on the municipal budget in Long Meadow. So we tried to take a holistic look at it. How do we maximize the developable land we have when someone comes in with a project? How do we maximize density? How do we make sure our services are as efficient as they possibly can be? How do we really pour over every line item to make sure we're getting that we need to be doing it, that is something that we're getting a good value out of. So, and I think and also working with the schools to make sure that we're on the same page in terms of what are expenditure drivers and, how can we work together if there's a certain year where the town just has a bigger need for something, discuss that with the schools and maybe they can defer on an operational expansion or a new program or something, and then there are times when the schools really need to do something, and the town has to say, okay, well then we'll hold off on something we're doing to make sure we have that collaboration. So that's and that culminated with Long Meadow also had I think 4 years in a row of GFOA Budgeting Best Practice Award. We also had I think 4 years in a row of unanimous budget approval at town meeting. So we got pretty good at it. And so that experience and my particular perspective on budgeting is something that will influence the budget process, although I don't anticipate making wholesale changes here in the first year of the budgeting process. Obviously, Concord has a very sophisticated and well thought out budgeting process that really isn't broken in any way, shape, or form. So I'm being mindful of the fact that I'm trying to make sure that I keep the budget process as it is currently known moving forward, but still maybe putting a little bit of my own touches on it. So to that end, in the budget instructions that went out, one of the things that I did is I stated the town manager's budget goal for fiscal year 21, and it is to provide resources for departments to sustain excellence and manage unforeseen circumstances while exercising fiscal discipline and committing to honor the will of town meeting. And to that end, a couple of changes that we want to implement are cash capital, which is normally carried in the departmental budgets, will be carried and appropriated in the capital debt plan warrant article, rather than the operating budget or the department budgets, to ensure that the expenditures are obligated for the purposes approved at town meeting. Long Meadow does it that way. I think a lot of other communities do it that way, where you have your operating budget article, and then the next article is your capital, and half of the article is raise and appropriate, the other half is borrow such sums. So that's something that Carrie and I have talked a lot about, and we're going to try that out this year. And then one of the things is sometimes positions can go unfilled for a while, whether it's lack of interest from the applicant pool, not finding the right fit, maybe the function isn't as pressing a need, or you've outsourced it, and so we're doing an inventory, if you will, or an audit of positions that are unfilled, how long they've been unfilled, and if they've been vacant for one fiscal year, then the position itself will be maintained within the department's organization, but the funding for the position will go into the salary reserve account, which means that it's a more focused picture of the department's operating cost. And if they decide they want to fill the position or they find a great applicant, we can of course just transfer funds from the salary reserve account back into the department to fill the position. But we want to see what is the actual operating cost of the department, and if they have a position that's lingered as unfilled, it's not really accurate. It's not as focused. And then we are saying that no funds approved as part of the FY21 town budget will be allowed to be encumbered unless permitted by Mass General Law and or other Department of Revenue regulations. And there was a budget directive issued last year for FY20 that existing encumbrances must be used or returned to the Treasury within 3 years of the date of approval. We're obviously continuing that. And so I also say that in addition to the provisions above, the FY21 town manager's budget will be drafted with a target increase of no more than 2.5% in accordance with Proposition 2.5, and keeping in mind the Finance Committee's sustainable growth rate target increase of 2.16%, which will help slow the trend in diminishing unused levy capacity. And I wrote that, and levy capacity is going up. So just you're welcome.
I made the calculation.
So those are a couple of things that we're going to try out this year. We've talked to the SMT about it, and I honestly believe that like I said, the excellence that the departments currently demonstrate in their operations day in, day out will really not be impacted by this. I look at this much more of how is it accounted for versus, how efficiently is it spent. And it's just, like I said, something that a couple of the things Carrie certainly mentioned to me, and I agree wholeheartedly with her on them, and we're going to give it a shot. But like I said, the number one goal is to make sure that the departments continue to serve the town of Concord to the best of their abilities, and the residents of Concord get the services that they enjoy and value. So that's it from that. That's a summary of the instructions.
Thank you.
Any questions about that or feedback? I mean, I would love feedback from the finance committee, I'm sure.
May I ask if you have an opinion on zero-based budgeting?
So I guess it depends on how you define that. I think that to me it's more of a term of art than anything else, and I kind of understand what it means, but I mean the practical reality is you're not going to tell your bondholders that, hey, you know what, we're zero-based budgeting, so our debt service payments are on the table. We're going to decide if we. I mean, that's not realistic. By the time you get done with non-discretionary, how much of the budget are you actually talking about? 3%, 5%? Not very much. And this is every municipality, not just Concord. I mean, every municipality is like this. When you get done with, now you could make the case that about labor being a discretionary cost, but what you pay people is fixed, either by a compensation plan or a collective bargaining agreement. Now, how many people you have doing the work, that's flexible. But then now you're talking about service levels and all that other stuff. So you said labor cost is 80% of your budget. Debt goes on top of that. Like I said, you get down to the end and you're really talking about discretionary funds. When it comes to that small percentage of discretionary funds, then yes, each expenditure or each purpose of expenditure should be reviewed. The reason why I think I hesitate to say I endorse zero-based budgeting is because you need to have expense line items. You need to be able to pay for continuing education. There's a large number of positions that need to maintain certification so they can keep doing their job. I mean, there needs to be vehicles so people can get around and do their work. There needs to be technology. So it's, I think it's more, I guess I think I call it value-based budgeting. And that is, are we getting the most out of it? And if you're not getting a good value out of it, then don't do it, or find a different way to do it. And I think that's what I think the spirit of zero-based budgeting is. I know the superintendent has focused on zero-based budgeting. She, and I think the way she does it is, in fact, zero-based budgeting. I think try and get to the same place. I think I like to do it. I like to do it in a different way.
The way the superintendent has gone about it, they've been able to consolidate numerous line items within their budget. They've been able to reorganize the way specific expenditures are categorized so that they're more rational. So she's really, it's a very serious operation the way she's approached it. So I'm not denigrating your value-based approach. I'm just suggesting that what she's doing is reviewing literally each line item of the budget and saying, is this properly categorized? Does it belong here? And do we need to do it? And that has caused them to roll up categories so that they've changed all kinds of categorizations for where people are allocated.
I did
it's
the
not
exact
like they're changing people. Like you're suggesting that you're still going to need N number of tutors and you're going to need so many people out managing the playground. Well, they had that all messy, and now they've got it all cleaned up. So the tutors are done in a line that's called tutors, and the people who manage the playground are in the aides category, which is a different category. So by going through those line items on a literally line item basis, they've been able to rationalize their budget. So she's been a very good proponent for that approach, and she's really made a.
Well, it sounds very similar to what I just said.
Yeah.
My approach is, I think that the difference is I always perceive zero-based budgeting to mean you're going to start from zero and add everything back in.
Correct.
Right.
I just don't know that that's a realistic methodology for municipal budgeting. But like I said, you want to get to the same point, which is, is every function necessary? Is it being done right? Is it being categorized? I mean, Carrie and I have had a couple of conversations about the number of line items, and are there ways we can consolidate our functions in the proper departments, that kind of thing. So
I guess just to pick up on it, I mean, zero-based budgeting, you can do it the way you described. So, well, these are all mandatory. You can't really do this, but at what point would you start reviewing the actual services and the services that we're delivering? So,
like every single day.
Well, no, I guess, the playground. So we have 5. Do we need 5 playgrounds or should we do 3? Like, those are the tougher questions, I guess. And maybe we live in a town where we don't have to do that. I'm kind of curious, did you have those kinds of conversations in Long Meadow where you're actually debating service levels, which then can start off at ground zero and you're deciding which services to add, in essence, that approach? Or,
Sure, of course we did. Of course, we looked at, I'll use an example. We added FTEs to the fire department as a result of a reorganization that was proposed by the fire chief. And the main goal of the reorganization was to have 2 ambulances going full-time instead of just 1. And that was driven on call volumes, the growth in call volumes and the aging of Long Meadow's population and the need for and the anticipated growth in call volumes. The revenue collected from that operation was going to largely offset the cost of the reorganization, but not in the first year. So the general fund had to front the money, if you will. So that's something where we looked at service level, where's the trend going and the need for service, and does this make sense? We proposed that. There are other. Yes, we did that every single year, and so it depends on and there were things we said we really shouldn't be doing this anymore. I was listening to the conversation earlier about town meeting's view of things as opposed to the finance committee's view of things, and I was talking to Dean and Mary about this, and it's a pretty common thing for town meetings to maybe not view how money should be spent the same way as the finance committee. I can tell you that in Long Meadow is very much that way. So that conversation had a very familiar ring to me, and so I think it's what does town meeting prioritize, and I try and balance from a value standpoint. What are the things that we directly control, and how are we making sure they're great and efficient? And what are the things that we know town meeting prioritizes, and how are we addressing the town meeting's priorities? And how does the finance committee see how we're doing on that, and get feedback from the finance committee that can help us, like I said, sharpen that picture. But service level, evaluating the performance of the departments, budgeting is every single day. Collective bargaining is every single day. It's just a part of the ongoing process of working with the departments and keeping the trains running.
I want to ask you a question. How many people do you need to have to open up the doors of this building every day, Monday through Friday? How many
I don't really know. I don't understand the question really.
Okay, so Monday morning, people want to come in. And so how many people do you have to have, not want to have, but how many people do you have to have in the building in order to be responsive to the doors being open?
So
how many people do you have to have in the office downstairs where the clerk office is there? The town manager, how many people do you have to have available?
I assume one. I've
How
never
many
really
people?
looked. I don't really know the answer to that. I assume it's 1.
Well, it could, probably more than 1, because you would have to have your assistant here.
Well, it's which door? It's.
So
It sounds like kind of a trick question, to be honest with you.
It's truly not. It's not a trick question, but it's just all right. If you're starting at the police department, how many people do they have to have there at 7:00 in the morning?
Are you asking to provide the services that town hall provides when they open the door? Is that what you're asking?
Right.
So
Services,
a
yes,
town
that
clerk,
may
for
be
example,
better.
a town clerk needs to be present at 8
Right.
a.m. Is that? I think that's what
That's
she's
the
trying
question.
to get at.
In order to provide the service.
Well, it depends on
Thank you.
It depends on the service. I mean, we provide a multitude of services here.
Okay, so at the police department, how many people do they have to have there to provide the service?
Well, I think the police department works on shifts, and they evaluate the number of people they need on a certain shift based on call volume and
That's
things
right.
like that.
Okay, so that's the kind of thing in terms of zero-based budgeting. That's how some people would approach it in terms of figuring out the needs there. And then if if you needed to change it because you saw some sort of blip going on, that's when you would then have the incremental. So there,
Well,
it's just a different way of, you were talking about value, and there's a difference between the value and then the actual service.
Yes, but insofar as managing the operations and evaluating the operations as a budgetary function, then yeah, I guess you could call that, if that's how you're describing zero-based budgeting, then yes, we do that.
I mean, there are multiple paths in budgeting. No one company, organization does their budget exactly the same way. And it's...
No, I understand
you could be
that.
successful with different approaches. Zero-based budgeting is not a panacea.
And I understand that as well. But I was trying to get a differentiation between the value and just the value of service and just service. Because there is a big difference and there is a big cost associated with that. If you can run the town clerk's office with 3 people, but you have 5, there's a value, and I'm the one standing in line waiting to have, whatever it is that I need to have, do you want to have your customers waiting there for 10 minutes or 15 minutes? So it's that, but there is a real difference.
Yeah,
That's all.
I hear what you're saying. And I think a lot of times, the size of the offices and the number of people doing the work sometimes is a derivative of the expectations of the community.
That's right also, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we have to move on.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. I was flashing back to the SATs. I'm like, if I leave my office at 8 a.m.
Okay. Time for the chair's report. I'll try to be brief. Okay. Headed to chair's breakfast. A few things from that. 2229 Main Street is, they're on the move. That committee is pressing forward, trying to get feedback from the community, because the next phase of that is to prepare the site for a future use. And they're trying to establish some set of possible future uses. So they want to hold a public hearing. Mike, do you have a date? Is there a date for that?
October 17th.
October 17th. Okay.
At 5 o'clock and again at 7.
5 and 7.
We have a meeting that night.
We probably have a meeting every night.
Exactly.
The Tax Fairness Committee, which we probably will get some feedback on our observer reports. They were just at the select board, and they are in the process of putting out a warrant article to paper over the fact that their 3-year temporary mitigation for elder taxes is going to expire. We've gotten 3 years. We've done 1 year of it. We're going to put the warrant article on this year, so this will be our 2nd year of it. But then it's got to go to the State House and come back, and we have to vote on it again. So that's a big deal. That was mentioned. Other things at the chair breakfast that have some interest for us is the Junction Village project is going to resubmit and try again for their debt options, or whatever they're called, their
Tax credits.
credits, their tax credits. They were denied, but apparently there are more questions and they're filling out more forms, so it looks more positive on this 3rd round that they would find some good information. You all got forwarded the capital plans that were presented at the select board. So that was a significant meeting at the select board where those capital plans were presented. It is anything from a $7 million, let's do a little renovation to most of our buildings, to $66 million for let's renovate more extensively, to anywhere from $70 to $150 million to let's build numerous new structures and administrative buildings, et cetera. So the select board just went through a process of prioritizing their capital projects coming out of that plan at this week's meeting. And the public safety building replacement is right behind the middle school. So that's where they are with that. But they may build a salt shed for public works because it's inexpensive and can be done. And they need a salt shed, but that's number 3 on their list. And then behind that, number 4 is major renovations for Department of Public Works. So these are big numbers. You know, a new public safety building would be $25 million at a minimum. If you want it on new land, it's $49 million. So, you know, we're looking at some big numbers. So that's my chair's report for now. And we're going to have Steve Ledoux in here. He'll be in for the Minuteman next week, but he just presented at the select board and we'll hear from him regarding Belmont trying to get back in. There's some financial implications to Belmont trying to get back into the district and things and that sort of thing. So those are my notes for chair's report.
Good.
Observer reports. Shall we start with you, Mary, and we'll go around this way.
Okay, quickly. I went to the CPC meeting on September 3rd, and in fact, the budget that was passed at the state level does increase recording fees, which means that the match for the town of Concord for CPC funding will go up. Right now, I think the match is about 11%, and estimates that I've seen is it could go up to 33%. So that's good news. The timing is kind of iffy because they don't start increasing recording fees until the 1st of 2020. So we got to go through a year of the incremental increase from the higher recording fees, and then the state has to figure out how much that is. And so it's going to be 2 to 3 years before we actually have that in our pocket. But good news is we're going to get more money from the state matching for CPC. Timing is still unclear to me. And that's about it.
I did Public Works and the retirement board. A couple of years they had a lot of it is getting generated by cut-through traffic. With the advent of traffic apps like Waze, the streets that had previously been quiet are now being swamped with traffic, and Department of Public Works knows that, and they're trying to come up with some ideas to help mitigate that. So that was just a big solution. And the retirement board, report there other than it was a little amusing to try to hear one of the investment managers explain why they're having trouble beating their own self-concocted index. So fun. I was going to suggest they call John. I've never seen
Change the index.
I've never seen a Fidelity fund that hasn't beaten its own self-based index.
So I do have one question about the smart streets.
Yeah.
I think a secondary or kind of a primary thing about smart streets was to encourage multimodal transportation. So you'll have a place for people to walk on a sidewalk. You'll have some sort of lane for bicycling. You'll have plenty of space for the car to not hit the bicycle. And I think there was that's an emphasis of that, as well as just trying to figure out why Waze is making my street nasty.
The crowd that was there, though, they're interested in safety and get all those foreign cars. I don't know.
Okay.
That's off my
All right. Great.
Nothing from the Board of Health at this point, so we're going to put the chair sheet out for about 6 weeks to get on the agenda with that and scheduling with the public safety.
So, the Energy Futures Task Force is basically a CSEC, Comprehensive Sustainable Energy.
Committee. Right.
So I haven't graced them with my presence yet.
Okay.
But I found out that they exist. And I've gone over some of their minutes and not too much that they're doing that would be affecting town budgets at this point. There are some things what people would be paying for energy, so. It's an interesting thing, so.
Peter, get a microphone maybe?
So, a middle school building committee. They are moving forward hot and heavy. They have hired Hill International as their owner's project manager. And they are currently now putting together the request for design services, and that will include a whole very detailed feasibility study that will include the site work, projected enrollment, detailed comparison of the options. It's pretty clear to me that they think the build new is going to be the way to go versus renovate, but they are going to look at the renovation options, look at the educational programming. There's definitely discussion about the escalating cost of construction at about 6.9% a year. So moving fast may be beneficial to save some money. They are talking about a price tag of anywhere between 80 and 100 million as a general range. They are following the MSBA process. They have submitted it, and they are amongst a group of 30 that it has been whittled down to, which has happened for the last 2 years, and they don't expect to be approved, but the MSB is supposed to be coming out sometime this fall to do a site review.
They did a site visit this week.
They did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
You've got the up-to-date info, so.
I tried to attend. They said, no, this is a business meeting. You can't shadow it.
Got
Is
it.
that right?
Yeah.
So
It's
they were
fine.
out.
It's
So
their process. It's not, even the school committee is not supposed to attend those.
So if I can just make a point on that very point, that so I went to the first meeting before we had observer assignments, and they had a bunch of site visits planned.
Yep.
And my thought was it would be really helpful to get some financial data on recent, construction projects for the benchmarking purpose that I think we might want to pursue. For
Yeah, and
for comparative purposes.
they
So
do
I don't know
have
if-
they do have a lot of projects.
Yeah.
They've got a really good experience on that board
Yeah.
as well. They're talking about a potential vote at the town meeting, special town meeting, I guess, in 2020, with following up with the polls after that, with an opening potentially. They're talking about whether to go open at the end of the year or try to do a mid-year opening in 2023. So there's still debate on that. So things are moving. They've got their subcommittees. They've got a financial subcommittee that's looking at the costs. They've got a sustainability committee looking at all sorts of sustainability metrics. So
So why a special town meeting? Why not just bring it up at the regular town meeting?
I think it's timing. It's all about getting it moving.
And when do they think they would have a special town meeting?
They were talking about in November 2020.
November.
So
I have-
they
go ahead.
expect, do they expect a warrant article on this year's town meeting for any kind of design work for, like they've already got money for feasibility and design and schematic design. Are they expecting a warrant article for a more robust design?
I didn't get that impression that they were going to be asking for more initially.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I have the good fortune of serving on the middle school building committee, and the answer to that question is no.
No. Okay.
They have current funds to get through schematic phase design, which will take them through the special town meeting that he referenced, and then they'll ask for the money for the remainder of the design and the construction.
In November 2020.
November of 20.
Yes.
November of next year, they'll be looking for a big push.
Can I just chime in too?
Yes.
That the building committee is not a subcommittee of the school committee. There's a committee created by the select board. So
Okay. Thank you for that.
if
Thank you
were
for that. Yep.
Write on that behalf rather than the school committee.
Okay, fair enough. Yep, that's good. It's a town committee.
Just one question. So they're following the guidelines of the MSBA, but they're not sort of submitting to the MSBA.
No, they submitted a formal request to the MSBA for funding, like they have for the last 2 years, and they've made it to a certain round and then been denied. Typically, what they see is about 12 to 15 projects get funded per year, and they make it to the round of 30, and then the school is not bad enough.
So, but you're saying that we've made it through to that round, or we're on our way to that round?
So we again made it to the same place we've made it to for the last 2 years, and we expect the same result.
Oh, I
They
see.
expect the same result.
So we're at the 50-50 point.
Yeah.
We're at 30 and they're going to winnow it to 15 and those people will get funded. And
So if MSBA were to potentially indicate they would be willing to fund, then they will pick up and move with them in lockstep.
but they are following the formats of all of the process elements of an MSBA process. So with any luck, we might
correct.
have some, we have some reusability of what we've done. We're not going to just throw it all away if we get on their track. So
When do they hear if they get the funding or not?
December.
This December,
This December.
they would know?
Yep. Yep.
Do you know how much, so you said they went with Hill?
Hill International, they interviewed, I can't remember, maybe seven or so, sounds about right.
Just out of curiosity, what did the number come in at?
Number for what?
Well, how much are they paying Hill to do? Hill is doing the schematic design, am I?
No, Hill is the owner's
project
project
manager.
manager.
They're the project manager,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
They asked for 1.5, I'm trying to understand, like,
So-
what did the number come in at?
There's actually a breakdown. I can't remember how it's broken out.
I'm just trying to understand, like, did they burn
Yeah.
1.5?
Yeah, this man might know. What?
Do you know?
So the agreement with Hill as the owner's project manager is about $300,000. And John, to your point, the data, that's their job. Hill's job is to collect data from construction projects, and then they also have private or independent third-party cost estimators who do all that as well. And that data it's a standard thing for the industry. So that data on construction projects will drive the cost estimating. The advertisement for the designer, I think, went out. It should have been advertised in the Central Register today, and so that process is also ongoing.
Dean, I just have a process question. So I didn't realize this, but one of the members of our committee, your wife is the co-chair of that building committee. So
That's correct.
I didn't know that. So I'd assume from a conflict perspective, whether it's optics or otherwise, how will we
I
deal
think
with
Greg,
that?
at a very early meeting of ours, he said he went through a whole process of ensuring that he's not in any kind of a conflict mode. Am I right?
Yeah, I've submitted to.
He submitted paperwork.
To the moderator that Dawn is my wife.
No, I understand.
She has been on the board. The original submitted that I did not. She was not on the board at that time.
She was not the co-chair of the building
She was
committee.
not- No, this is 2 months, I think, that, that's months since you became co-chair of that.
Right, okay.
But I could update that to say now, there shouldn't be a conflict of interest because there's no gain to us on either side, that we're both working for the town to do the town's best.
Yeah, but your wife is running the committee that's going to submit a budget to us, right, for
I will
middle
say,
school?
Freddie, if you guys see that there is a conflict.
We can talk about it
Yeah.
optically.
There-
I think
I
that
would
creates a
mention
problem.
that at the end of this, if anybody that is not aware,
The-
my wife is.
What would end up being is probably not a budget, but probably a debt request, so they could get money to do their work. Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
I-
Yep. No, I think it's reasonable.
I think it's,
Yeah.
okay, I just wanted
It's
to make
fine.
sure.
Fair enough.
I have nothing to report.
Okay. Wade?
I attended the rec committee meeting on September 3rd. I really have not much to report. The upcoming meeting on October 1st, I will not be able to attend, so if somebody wants to sit in. they're going to have 229 Main Street Committee is going to come to the Rec Commission, and the Rec Commission is going to bring all the different town sports entities that will have an interest in that property. I think it'll be a really interesting meeting. I'm sure they're kind of come with their wish list, so we'll see what comes of that. But nothing beyond that.
Nothing on the planning board. You saw they completed the draft of the two-family bylaws, and they were in the process of sending their final recommendations to the Zoning Board of Appeals for the public library renovation. But there's nothing else affecting the Finance Committee.
The Long Range Capital Planning Task Force, I'm not sure that they have all the members yet. I need to be in touch with Terry, I guess, to let her know that I'm the liaison to that. And Dean had indicated what the town's priorities are in terms of their long-range planning process, which during that discussion that I watched on TV, there's, and it was the select board chair who brought it up, that maybe the priority, since the second one was the building, the safety building, which they'd need a new location for it. Well, maybe that property would come up as the second, second in line, but maybe they wouldn't have a property for a few years. So how does the third one just go into that place, et cetera? But the bottom line was something we had talked about before, like if you have these costs for each project, then you can kind of factor them in. You can have different scenarios, and you can say, what if 1, 3, and 4 are available? So what kind of impact will that have? Funding impact and debt service impact will that have? And you can plan that out. You can see what would happen over time.
For Minuteman, so pretty exciting. So they're in the new school, which is terrific, a year early, and which is even better. You don't hear that often on large construction projects. So they have a ribbon cutting on October 4th, which I'm going to attend. And as Dean, you mentioned, we'll have Steve Ledoux here, who's the new representative on the school committee, to talk about budget. I think next meeting or something.
It's our next guideline.
And the water, the Belmont issue, it will also come up there. So the good news is they have, the enrollment is where they want it to be, and they actually have a waiting list for freshmen, which is great. So I think they're pretty excited about it.
Fantastic.
So I observed tax relief that you mentioned is trying to make their effort permanent, and as we all know, about a third of our residents are officially tax stressed, or housing cost stressed, rather, I should say, and taxes are part of that component, so that's a very worthy endeavor. The other committee I observe is financial audit committee. And the most important thing is I have the schedule. The light plant audit has been finalized, and the town and the district, audits will be finalized over the next several months. So I look forward to a meeting every night.
It's busy. The library committee met the last Tuesday prior. I wasn't able to make the meeting, but they were talking about the visioning project for the long range planning around the expansion, and they talked about the digital surveillance policy. But I'll catch up on the minutes when I see the next, which is October 15th.
One question: do they ever talk about transportation and parking?
They did talk about it. I think it was in the August session, talking about how that is actually going to work, and maybe if they can expand a couple of, take on some incremental slots and how that would actually work. And I know that, as you go to the library, there's that side area, and what's the impact of that going to look like? So that was addressed then, but I don't know if they spoke about it more a week or so ago.
Did they ever work with that transportation? Who talked about that tonight? There was something about the transportation committee that was set up by the planning department.
I don't recall them getting into a lot of the detail, but I can go back to the minutes and get back to you.
Couple notes from select board meetings that have a financial impact. the financial arrangement between the town and the library corporation is being revisited. Typically, the town pays operating budget and salary, and the corporation pays for building and maintenance, and I'm not exactly sure how that's going to be changed, but they're at least looking at that. Am I got that right, Mike? I think that's okay. There was there's some issues with the Giroux land. There's $50,000 appropriation that is to help with the affordable home that's got to be put in, but that also has some gotchas in there, which is that they need to get across the Bruce Freeman rail trail in order to make the access to the property work correctly, and that means going through Mass DOT. And so this is like a contingent approval for some pre-construction money. That was at the select board of the 29th. The select board of this week had, as I already mentioned, the review of the previous select board, the intervening select board. They got a presentation from the people who did the capital review. And at the current one, they went through all of the priorities which I identified. Middle school is at the very top of the list, right? The public safety building, which it appears they would like to see that not just expanded on Walden Street, but a new one built somewhere on other land. So if they find that they find some land in West Concord, they would probably mothball or stop using the firehouse over there. And this would become the secondary. The one on Walden Street become like the secondary or, satellite one, and they'd build a major one in West Concord. That's a possibility. But that's the priority, is to get that building done. And the numbers for CPC appear to be 1.8 million, with 13 applications asking for 2.6 million. So there's a lot more ask than there is money available.
Shocking.
Available. So that's my report on select board. I attended a school board meeting, and the wheels sort of fell off the bus when they got into this discussion of school trips. The school typically allows teachers to solicit students to come on trips with them, and they may go as far afield as the Galapagos Islands or Paris or wherever. Now, these are very expensive, and they tend to create a divisive nature within. There's not the most egalitarian approach to this. It's a pay-for-play sort of thing, but it's also sometimes asking for time off from school to take the trip or other allowances, or they're part of the Q5 program. So this ended up being literally a 2-hour discussion that kind of devolved and went nowhere. But I did spend those 2 hours. I did spend those 2 hours tallying up the total dollars that would need to be expended on all the trips that the teachers had proposed.
Ooh, do tell.
$402,000. $402,000.
Paid by the parents.
That's all paid by the parents. And
Including
there's very little
including the
actual
teachers,
support.
the teachers' airfare and all that's paid by the parents?
For example, I'll give you one example. 25 students to Paris at $3,200 a student. That's an $80,000 trip. 25 students to Japan at $3,500. That's an $82,500 trip. So the total of these trips is over $400,000, and they struggled with how can we do this while being, while trying to give opportunity on a reasonably equitable basis to students.
But that's not town money, right?
That's not town money. His parents are paying.
But who's paying for the teachers?
The teachers may actually bundle in they may just be paid for by the trip by the parents. They may be bundled in, I don't know. So
the trips usually include the teachers.
the teachers are.
It's just sort of prorated somehow.
Chaperones.
That's why the teachers love to.
They love
Yeah,
taking
I'm
them.
sure. Can we go?
This has been a friction point at the school committee for years, which is that, parents who can afford to send their children to Ecuador will do it, and other children have to go home and say, "Mommy, why can't I go to Ecuador?" And, and so they struggle with this, and they're trying to come up with a framework. To their credit, they're trying to come up with a framework where there can be some level of support for, financial aid. and there's not really much of anything right now. It's all very catch as catch can. And so they're working on it, but it kind of derailed the whole meeting. So that's that.
Can I just make one point
Yeah.
on the select board meeting? Because I'm trying to go to a meeting every night. And,
Oh, yeah.
and the other night, the select board, I believe, expressed an interest in getting, a graphic or some sort of representation of what the impact of all these municipal projects would be. And I think we have some work on that. And so I'm sure Kerry would be happy to share that with the select board.
Yeah, and I didn't come up with my computer.
Well, I don't mean right now, but I mean,
Right.
Okay.
All right, Finance Director.
Okay, one item. We are in the process of refunding or refinancing a bond issue. And I think this all started very innocently with John asking a question, do we have any debt to refinance? We typically look at that every year, but we do our borrowing in May or June. Typically, we're a frequent borrower. We go through this process every year. But back in 2017, when the tax law was changed, one of the changes to the tax law that you maybe didn't hear about is it eliminated municipalities' ability to advance refund bond issues. So we typically would be doing an advanced refunding if it was to our benefit, and we'd roll it into our annual refunding, and that would save on issuance costs. Because we don't have that ability anymore, we have to do it, we have just the current refunding opportunity, and I wasn't necessarily thinking that we might be looking at these off cycle, but John happened to ask, I think was a pretty innocent question, and found that we had an opportunity to refund one of the Willard School issues. We have $6.1 million left on that. The final payment was in fiscal 29. The first call date is next month. And so we asked our financial advisor to do an analysis and see if we had an opportunity to refund. And he reported back that we have really a great opportunity. Typically, we're looking for 3 to 4% savings if we're going to refinance. This one first modeled out at just under 10%, and the second, 9%. The second update that we just did for the rating agency, it was just over 10%. So we'll be taking bids on Tuesday. So we do expect to save about in excess of $600,000 net of fees. That's about $85 on the median tax bill for the remainder of the for the life. So it's not huge, but it's a dinner.
It's good.
John.
John, do you have any other questions?
Do we have a meeting tomorrow night? So what was the coupon on the old bond that we're refunding? Do you know?
So they were the coupon rates were between 3 and 4% on the existing, first issued in January of 2010.
And the new issue is 1.3 something?
Yeah, in about that range.
Wow.
Not nothing.
So that's the good news, but the bad news is there is no further callable, refundable bond out there for us going forward.
Right. So this will be the last.
Yeah.
Right. So we did have a discussion about when bonds are issued. Most of the borrowing that we do is for 10 years or less than 10 years, and we don't have a call provision in those. But for the larger projects, the school projects, we do have a call provision.
Yeah.
We have two additional calls on other bond issues. I have them marked on my calendar now because they're going to be coming off cycle for when we're thinking about borrowing. So we're making sure, if we're not hearing from our financial advisor, that we're prompting him to be looking at these as well.
So the new issue will have a 10-year maturity and not be callable?
It will not be callable. It is, are there 10? There's 9 years. It'll be 9 years. Yeah.
Okay. Would it be terribly wrong to ask the financial advisor why?
Why no
a 9-year,
call?
well, yeah, because, a lot can happen over the next 9 years. It would be a great option to have, just like this was a great, opportunity for us. And so I don't really know why, that decision is made based on the maturity of a bond rather than on some professional advisor's outlook and forecast for what interest rates might do.
Yeah.
And so,
So I did raise that question with our financial advisor, and he suggested that municipal debt issued for longer than 10 years, it makes sense to have a call. It doesn't make financial sense to have a call for an issue that's less than 10 years because of the market for those bonds. It is not as strong if there's a call provision in something that only has a 10-year maturity.
so we're a AAA rated in a world where, well, sorry, this is a longer discussion for another day.
I have a question. If John hadn't started this with his innocent question, right? Do you think you would have gotten a call from Peter Fraser at Hilltop to tell you that we have this opportunity? Or
So I did ask him that question, and
Yeah.
I was a little ticked off
Yeah.
having to ask him.
Yes.
He said that they had just started looking at this. And when we went through the timetable, it made sense because I don't know how long we've been at this, for 6 weeks at this point. He said that they had just started looking at it. And I've worked with him off and on for 20 plus years. We've done a lot of refundings. This is the third refunding I've done since I've been here. He prompted the other ones as well. So yeah, I think John had asked a couple of days before I was
do you feel
going to
confident
hear.
that Peter's looking out for us?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay,
That's
thank
it.
you. Citizen comments.
Brooks Reed, 366 Estabrook Road. At the June FinCom meeting, many of you, including Ms. Hartman, asked aloud why expenditures specific to the Estabrook lawsuit have never come before voters. Mr. Swain pointed out that the expenditures were something that town meetings should decide. Mr. Rubenstein asked, how does this get in front of the citizens so they can say we can take the pain or we can't take the pain? Who makes the decision? Is it made by the select board? Is it made by the town manager? I have the complete email thread that explains how the select board decided not to let it come before town meeting. If you're interested, I can give you a copy. You care?
Okay. You can you could forward it to us, and we will send it around. It's
I
fine.
care.
Paper
No,
copies
it's
for
fine.
everyone.
I
No.
care.
You care?
I do.
Page 51.
For the increase in the legal expense fund.
It was 100. We voted.
It was 100,000.
100,000, right.
So it's on page 51.
It was a town meeting vote.
What?
There was a town meeting
That-
vote at the special town meeting, but it was
Word
only
est-
for 100.
The word Estabrook did not appear anywhere in that article. It was not about Estabrook.
Just for legal
It
expenses.
was just legal
Correct.
expenses. You're right. Okay.
But
Okay.
It did?
It did. You can go back and listen to it on YouTube.
Okay.
They said it was not related to Estabrook?
It said it was the general legal expenses.
This is one copy.
Long discussion about how all the other legal expenses
Okay.
needed it, not Estabrook.
All right, we asked for it. Yeah, exactly. And redacted. Well, that's what, okay. So, thank you. I will take a motion to adjourn. So moved. Okay. Second. Okay. All in favor? Stand up. 9:30.